This week's episode of Dan Really Likes Wine, brought to you by Norman Goodfellows, starts with a rather embarrassing admission. This is Truffles on the Park, an institution on the Johannesburg dining scene, but it's the first time I've ever been here. And I'm kicking myself that I haven't been before because it's charming inside. The menu looks terrific and the wine, well, the wine looks great as well. All the more so today though, because inside behind me are a whole pile of Franschhoek winemakers. And in a few weeks time, you'll see exactly what we got up to. But for today, it's the chance to see the restaurant for the first time, have it accompanied by some wonderful Franschhoek wine, and give you an introduction to today's adventures. A little later on in the show, I'll be catching up with a guy who's allergic to shoes. Farmer Angus used to be a big-time banker in London. He threw that all in, came back to South Africa, and is now the agricultural voice of conscience down at Spear, where he's leading the charge on regenerative farming, and that extends to wine. And he's got his own wine. And I sat down with him to discover not just how good it is, but how well it goes with charcuterie. First of all, though, I went across town to Melrose Arch, the African Pride Hotel, to sit down with the team at Kebo Noir and discover how two bankers in the world of marketing decided that their love of wine needed to go one step further and turn into an actual business. Their brand is Kebo Noir, their passion is writ large, and their love for the wine that they make is very clear indeed. Most people who've been drinking or enjoying wine for a certain period of time what their wine dream is, and it comes down to something fairly similar. I'd love to have my own wine farm, I'd love to have an estate, I'd love to have my own wine brand, and for most people it is a pipe dream. But for two people in Johannesburg who've become particularly good friends over the last year or so, it's something they decided they wanted to do, both because A, it was a dream, and B, it would save them hundreds of thousands of rand a month in terms of not having to buy other people's wine instead. Together they are Kebo Noir, Kensi, Tebogo. Lovely to have you on the show. And to be able to do on camera what the three of us have done so much over the last year, which is just share this overriding passion. And I remember first meeting you in particular, Kensi, we were at a dinner that I was hosting, and I'd been told by some people who worked with you, you better be careful, Kensi quite likes her wine and she knows it quite well. And within about the first 8 minutes, you'd asked me 3 questions I'd normally expect from a professor of wine at Napa Valley University. Because there is not just an enjoyment of wine, which you will have, but I've always understood that yours goes a bit deeper, and you do have this real genuine interest in what's beyond just the glass.
Absolutely. I mean, I guess for me, beyond just the glass is like what I think is the stories that wine brings, right? Like, and it could be the stories around how it's made. I always find that fascinating. It could be the stories around the winemakers themselves. I mean, I've been lucky and fortunate enough through my job and through you to meet some amazing winemakers. And when you hear their journeys and stories, it's always interesting. But also, like, it could be just the stories around, like, whenever we sit with you and, like, you know, the wines that we discover together and all of that. But I've always had a massive passion for wine, and it's not something that I got into at a young age. I started off, as you can imagine, at varsity drinking, what do they call them? Like ciders and stuff. So it's something that
budget
driven. But when I started getting into it, I really loved it. I loved the different varieties. I loved how it could meet different moods. I'm an absolute fan. Not only just of our own brand, but of wine in general.
And I think that taps in, Kensi, to an area that you and I both love about wine, and I suspect Tebogo as well. But you have got this small side business as being one of the top marketers in the country, and marketing of anything. It doesn't matter what it is. If you're selling bricks, if you're selling plumbing supplies, if you're selling anything, it's about telling stories.
Absolutely.
And I always feel there are very few products on the planet that can match the capacity for storytelling that wine has.
Absolutely. I mean, so if you look at our payoff line for Kebo Noir is never stop exploring. And that's because you can use exploring if you think about it in many ways. It's about like exploring different types of wines, different varietals, different wine farms. Every time I travel, I'm always looking for where's the wine farm, where's the winelands that I can go visit. I mean, I went to the winelands in Budapest, like where they don't even export wines anyway. Like the wines they make are, they sell them like literally in Budapest alone and stuff. So I've found that it just the storytelling that comes out of wine is incredibly powerful. And sometimes it's just as simple as the person I was with when I tried this wine for the first time. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't have to be like really difficult. I mean, Tebogo will tell you one of the things for us when it came to starting this brand is we know a lot of people who, when we're there and we're ordering wine, they always like get a little bit intimidated. They're like, oh my God, Tebogo and Kensi are here. And we're always like, actually, for us, like our wine brand is not about the technicalities of that. Of course, there has to be a particular quality in the wine, definitely. But for us, it's actually the stories. And we really like truly believe that like every bottle has a story. Yeah.
All of which means, Tebogo, that you found a real kindred spirit here. I'm wondering how this came about. Were the two of you sitting at your office canteen, making your way through a couple of lobsters and a glass of Chablis, and looking across the table? And it wouldn't have been a romantic connection. It would have been a culinary and wine-loving and indulgence connection. How did a conversation so many of us have had, oh, this would be a great idea, actually turn into reality?
So there's 4 people that we've known since 2012. We started this little collective called the Wine Society. And it was just a bunch of friends who were getting into wine and needed an excuse to get together. And the whole notion was you actually come to a meeting, so one of us will host, and you bring a bottle of wine that you've just discovered recently. And it's not really similar to what Kensi said. It's not about, is it from Swartlands or is it from Stellenbosch? Was like, guys, I had this beautiful wine at a beautiful restaurant and I really thought it would be great to share it here. And here's the story. And that's how actually our passion for wine actually started. And then, of course, after a while, you start saying, guys, how about we start our own wine brand? Yeah,
So it starts off with the 6 of you. How about we start our own? The fact that there's only 2 actually tells you already everything you need to know.
So then fast forward to a one meeting where we actually had an entire business plan put together. And then between 4 years of that initial meeting to the birth of Kebo Noir, we then decided, look, my friend, our passion still is strong. And we really, really want to be involved in wine beyond just drinking it. And yeah, that's how, Kebo Noir came into being.
Now, the idea and the reality, Kensi, often have a fair amount of distance between them. And one of the greatest measurements of distance is the Newton meters of work involved in putting all of this together. But neither of you are afraid of a bit of hard work, which I've come to discover. Did you revel in that process of bringing this new project together and discovering what it meant to create a wine brand?
Well, we were very lucky that we actually complemented each other in moments when I would be like, oh, this is like really hard. And he'd have the energy and the other way. But there's moments, right, in the process that are like incredibly fun. So for example, our winemaker, David, when we sat with him for the first time and we were like tasting and deciding, which varietals to go with and, all of that. I mean, like, ask me anytime to come and choose like wine for you. Like, I don't, So we have moments like that, like where it's really incredibly fun. But and designing it also and we're marketers, right? So for us, the story behind the brand. So I would say, I said to Tebogo, before we launch the brand, it has to have a story. Like, whereas other people will probably be like, we're just going to launch a brand and stuff. So the whole never stop exploring thing was something like we really like enjoyed like working on. The design, we brought on a friend of ours, Mzamo, to help us with that and just choosing that, the logo. I mean, we were like, we're choosing our own logo. This is fun. But then we also realized the one weakness we both had was around what I would call maybe the admin like side of it. And we brought in someone that we actually gave a little bit of ownership into the company to take on that. And I think it's important that like you can take a passion point and it can actually become not a passion anymore because it's like so draining. So I feel like actually the decision to bring in Putlako and say, look, where there's some things that we actually just cannot handle, and actually they don't give me any joy and energy in this process. Like have the ability to know, like, let me let this go to someone else. Yeah.
The jobs that you two have center, I have no doubt, around the selection and regular quality control of the wine itself. I did some research. I went back to my spreadsheets, which I fill in every day, and said that of the 82 meetings we've had over the last while, which are always at a bar or restaurant, between the two of you, you've tried 161 different varietals of wine and blends thereof. So how on earth do two people with such a broad shared palate narrow it down to the 4 wines we have today?
I think the starting point is trust. I think there's just a level of trust in each other's opinions and preferences. You know, a funny thing is we came in with our own biases. We never liked Chenin. We wanted a Chardonnay, right? But, you know, we then reflected on the fact that actually Chardonnay is not a top-selling white varietal, so we need to go with one that is. I mean, in our latest vintage, we actually included a Sauvignon Blanc. And our Sauvignon Blanc came into the mix is that Kensi, through her husband Nelson, started to appreciate Sauvignon Blanc.
Which I never did. And then I was like, I think we need a Sauvignon Blanc, actually.
I mean, she used to describe it in a way that I can't say it on camera.
Not the first person to have done that.
But yeah, and I think, and then that's how we actually even, you know, got to our MCC being a Blanc de Blanc, and something that we're very proud of. But I think outside of the passion and wanting to make sure that our product is great, I think it's also being a fun journey. You know, for me, when I think about the wine tastings that we've had, you know, with her dog Samuel Jackson on her patio, it's really being fun. And I think this is the first time that I've married passion and something very seriously. At least it's not a job. But yeah, very much an enjoyable experience that we're still going through. And we're looking forward, you know, to still growing the brand even further and getting more people to explore it.
Especially, like, I mean, Dan, I can tell you, like, our MCC, we believe is like world class, honestly. And it's been our most selling, fastest selling, the one that the repeat is insane. I mean, all the other 3 are also great, but like the MCC has particularly really stood out. And going back to the trust thing, when I drink MCC or champagne, I'm normally like just a normal brut girl. So to go Blanc de Blanc, I was like, and he loved it. And I was like, okay, let me, you know. And then I got, and I was like, okay, this is actually great. So that trust thing, I think, is like really important when you're going to have a partnership like this. Yeah.
2 things before we taste the wine, which I think reflect really well on you. You're still going and talking to each other this far into it. And also, initially, if you look at the numbers, and I have seen them through Dave Wibberley, who makes wine, you guys had made a small profit before you factored in owner consumption, which is very high. 38 million rand in the last financial year. We're not going to try the Sauvignon Blanc today. We'll leave that for next time. Your husband Nelson, when he gets back from his 007 interview. Looks just like a very young Sean Connery, does Nelson. And I've had the bubbles aplenty. I'm really looking forward, though, to the Chenin and the Cab. And I'd like to get from both of you just a couple of words on why the Chenin does it for you, particularly as initially you thought Chardonnay. Chardonnay now sits with the bubbles, so it is still there in a manner of speaking. But Chenin Blanc, which for me has such wonderful versatility and is so much fun. Tebogo, what's giving this Chenin Blanc just that little touch of magic for you?
Yeah, you know, for me, being someone who was always on the Chardonnay side of things, I always found the acidity of Chenin a bit too off-putting. And if you taste our Chenin, which is from the Swartland region, there's a finesse to it and a well-roundedness to it, which I absolutely enjoyed. And even the mouthfeel on the palate, you know, you do get the zestiness of the lime, but it's not overpowering. And I think when it's chilled and on a summer's day, I found it to be absolutely amazing.
So he's the one in the partnership who talks like that. I go, oh my God, it tastes amazing.
All right, well then, don't give it to me in wine speak. You're not going to thank me for doing this, but I will mention on camera that you are, I think now, a 7-time South African Marketer of the Year. So give it to me in marketing terms then. You're trying to flog me a bottle of your Chenin Blanc. Why should I buy it, Kensi?
This is the Shannon that on a gorgeous Sunday afternoon with the sun out in Joburg, you're sitting in your garden with the people that you love, and it's crisp, and it actually makes you even have better conversations than you would usually have.
It's a conversation lubricant.
So yeah.
Oh, the Shannon for Joburg. So in fact, as I drink it, I just close my eyes and I can almost hear the sound of that taxi tire hitting a pothole. No, I think the Shannon out of the Swartland is getting so much recognition, and you've tapped into something really cool here. And that just, for anybody who's thinking, where on earth are they making the wine in Johannesburg? These grapes, of course, are coming up from the Cape, but perfected with your eagle eye up here. So you've sold us the Shannon. Tebogo, before we go into very colourful marketing speak, give us the wine interpretation. You've got some Cabernet Sauvignon. Where does it come from? How old is it? And what's making this one stand out?
Yeah. So, and I think this is the one time where actually we just chose what we loved, because we love Cab.
Yeah.
And we wanted to go with Cab as our red offering. Stellenbosch. Generally with cabs, there's a boldness about it, flavor complexity. I think this one for me, what I loved is that it's not as bold because it's much more influenced by the Bordeaux blend kind of style. So much more smoother, much more sophisticated. And that's what I love about it. And also I think the alcohol doesn't really hit you, on the nose, when you smell it. It's not as powerful, but you can get, the flavors that come through. And for me, this is also, all of them, they're my favorites. But if there's two I could drink every day, is the Shannon and the Cab, without a doubt.
Our Cab Sav is blanket, fireplace, Kebo Noir Cab Sav, and a really good book. I always think about red wine for winter, fireplace. This is a really good one. Also, for now, autumn going into no, it's actually spring going into summer and stuff. It's not that heavy actually, so you can drink it in general, anytime.
It's a style of Cabernet Sauvignon we're seeing a lot more of, where the elegance of the fruit is paramount to what is being produced, and it's no longer the thug in a bottle
Exactly.
that Cabernet Sauvignon can have the potential to be.
Yeah.
They've come through really nicely, and the biggest thing for me is not just what they taste like, but watching the two of you talk about them like they are your newborn
Little
kids.
baby.
That's how much they mean to you. Which answers to a degree the final question I wanted to ask, which was about the future. But I think I can say the future's pretty guaranteed, and that you're both obviously very vested in this.
Yeah.
But Tebogo, where do you take this forward? Where does this continue to go? Does it remain the almost garagiste project that ticks along as a cool little hobby, or is this listing on the JSE in 5 years' time?
No, that is the idea. That's the long-term plan. But, to be honest, Dan, I think because, we haven't put a lot of pressure on ourselves, because I think that it's a balance, right? It's a passion. And of course, because, we are commercially minded people who work for a little green bank, we do think about the numbers, right? But our journey with Kebo Noir is exactly that. It's still a journey. And we're looking to continue to build and build and build. We do want to see, further availability and open up our distribution channels. We want to be at more wine shows and make sure that we get more people to taste it and get it in their hands. But as I say, the pressure we put on ourselves is to make sure that we do it justice.
Yeah.
And that's where we are. But we definitely want to see it, get much bigger.
Yeah.
So plenty of vision in terms of where this can go. Kensi, if we're sitting down here in 5 years' time, you're approaching your 40th birthday.
Chalma, this one.
You've got even more marketing awards, and you're sitting back to tell me, well, Dan, I've just been voted World Marketer of the Year, and I'm about to head off to Maldives for my birthday. But my biggest source of excitement is Kebo Noir. Why is that? What in 5 years' time, in the perfect world, has this brand become that makes Kensi, the wine-loving marketer, happiest of all?
I guess, Tebogo has probably spoken a lot about we haven't put pressure on ourselves, which was very important. But for me, if I look back in 5 years' time, would be to walk into a restaurant somewhere And as I walk in, I hear someone say, "Can I please order?" And they don't know me at all, but I can just hear, a group of people going, "Can I please order a bottle of Kebo Noir, Sauvignon Blanc, and stuff?" And I'm just like, "Oh my God, that's my wine!" That for me would be the most beautiful thing. I would know that actually we've created something. It might not be on the JSE, but we've created something that people are giving enough energy and passion to it as we have actually, because it will tell me that they have felt the energy and the passion that we've brought into it.
Well, you've got a very clear vision for what the legacy will be that you leave through this medium of wine, and that's terrific to see. And most importantly, though, the two of you could probably bottle some 10 rand ago wine, and with your combined marketing prowess, still manage to sell it to anybody, but you'd only sell the first one. That has to be backed up. Here you can sell the second, third, fourth, and more, because the wine does back up the story. It's a cool story. It's a wonderful friendship that's manifested through wine. It's a lot of fun to drink. It's even more fun to drink with the two of you. And I have a real suspicion that this is really only just getting started.
Dan, thank you for having us.
Thank you very much,
We appreciate you.
So there we go. We've got a few bottles of wine to finish, maybe some bubbles to try as well, and possibly the Sauvignon Blanc for research. Kebo Noir is that great example of a few friends who sat around a table and thought, it'd be quite nice to have some wine one day. For 99% of the world, that never happens. The 1% exception is Kebo Noir. Now, what you saw there was the start of what ended up being a very, very long lunch, because there was so much to celebrate and discuss and share and enjoy. Both Kensi and Tebogo have got this rich history of exploring the world of wine, and the fact that they'd now be able to make it into this passion project is so fun to share. And although the Kebo Noir brand is still very small and very young, I think there's a lot more to come from it. Now, this particular restaurant is, it's part restaurant, part greenhouse. You feel like you're in a jungle setting. They've done it up really, really nicely. And it's the kind of thing that people not from Johannesburg, especially those from Cape Town, don't expect to find in the big city up north. There's a really cool, welcoming, green forested tropical feel to it all, and I've had a really, really good time so far. Seeing a lot of good friends who are winemakers, some of whose brands I've known for a very long time. My early days at UCT, going out to Franschhoek and finding my way about places like La Motte and Anthony Rupert, Haute Cabriere, Haute Espoir. These were brands, Chamonix, Dieudonné, I've known for a very long time. But there are others with whom I am only a little more recently familiar. Take Labrie and Irene, who pops up on the show on a regular basis. She's a terrific winemaker, and this Chardonnay in particular, it's under 300 rand a bottle, which when you drink it and when you see what premium Chardonnay is going for, this is one of the best deals on show today. The other really good deal is my dear friend Gerard Holden's Big G. Holden Mans is also one of the slightly newer additions to the valley out in the Boerhoek, and that Bordeaux blend led by Cabernet Sauvignon, some Merlot, some Cabernet Franc, I would say is a fixture in the Dan Really Likes Wine cellar. It's not, because my wife keeps drinking it, so we have to keep reordering it, but it's a banker, which is a good way to go because Gerard himself is a former banker. Speaking of former jobs, well, Farmer Angus did a great stint in the UK from a financial perspective, but ultimately it wasn't really where his heart lay. And when given the option of moving to Japan to continue his life in finance, he decided he'd had enough and he wanted to be a farmer instead. And now he finds himself at Spear, and it's regenerative farming that he's so passionate about and that he feels is the way we really should be going. So I went along to Marble. He had some of his charcuterie, which you've almost certainly tried. You probably haven't seen his wine though, because they're brand new. How good is the wine? How does it pair with charcuterie? Let's go and find out. So the stress lines and the evidence signs of somebody who's clearly working far too hard is that of a WSET 3 student. Because if you've done WSET 3 or know anything about it, It is reams and reams and reams of study and theory and textbooks I largely do not understand, which makes it very different to the star student in my class, who is a high-flying sort from Spear, who answers all the questions correctly and is the definitive teacher's pet, which is a good reason not to like her, but she has redeemed herself somewhat, because as part of the greater Spear story, she tipped me off to something rather cool that's happening in the wine world, involving somebody who, until she mentioned his name in a wine context, I only knew as both a master of charcuterie and somebody who didn't own any shoes. So today I get to discover, Farmer Angus, not just the incredible charcuterie that you produce, but also this wine story. And I think encompassing both of them is this philosophy. And I say in jest the no shoes. I don't think until today I've seen you with shoes on, but it does speak rather broadly to this philosophy where you have this very close and very passionate link to the natural world and to producing anything that's farmed in a way that's very sensitive to the earth.
I should hire you as my marketing person.
Done.
Because that's glib, it flows off the tongue. I'm going to try and remember some of those phrases.
Pay me in wine and biltong and we're good to go.
Well, we've got to taste it first.
I remember the first time I met you, and it was Michael Jordan, who's a fellow director on Dan Really Likes Wine, who gave me a little bit of background and said, you have to meet Farmer Angus and you might know his name. And I did, of course, because I've seen your name across the various cold meat products that you have in stores around South Africa. And he said what he loved most about you was this very firm commitment to the way you approach farming. Tell me a bit about that and how that came about.
So the umbrella term that we use is regenerative agriculture. And these wines, along with the cured meats and the biltong and the beef and the eggs, are all products of the regenerative philosophy. And I really like the fact that you talk about philosophies, because that's what underpins it doesn't matter how and what is easy, it's the why that really matters. I don't know how deep you want to dive into this thing, but say if we rewind 20 years, 20, just over 20 years ago, I was a stockbroker in London working for Goldman Sachs.
The natural platform for becoming a regenerative farmer, as
correct.
So many case studies show.
Correct. My path was clearly mapped out. Anyway, I declined to go to Tokyo doing a thing called derivative sales. We cut the golden handcuffs. We moved back to South Africa, just wanting to build a house. It ended up being a clay house. And so slowly these environmental issues started percolating. Whereas I was going to build a concrete and steel house because that's what Goldman people do. And then I was introduced to Nicolas Joly's book, his first book on biodynamic wine. And there was definitely, it was almost a Damascene conversion. It was a profound moment for me to realize that there's a whole world out there that is beyond what I had thought of as reality. And so I then actually started fiddling around making a little bit of wine, which was completely undrinkable. I'm actually turning it into white wine vinegar, into vinegar at the moment, because I then will use
regenerative.
Exactly, because I'm going to use the vinegar for my biltong instead of having to buy in amazing vinegar. I'm digressing. So we then started farming in December of 2008. And I was farming only on a small part of Spear, but farming regeneratively, organically, and biodynamically. And Spear was producing conventional wines off the farm at the time. And I said to Spear, listen, guys, I'm going to manage the whole farm, but there's no ways we're going to do conventional viticulture in the middle of an organically regenerative farm. Furthermore, we want to turn the wine that we're going to make from the farm into good wines. Because sadly, a lot of the people who come to the organic movement come to it philosophically, but then they end up being organic by neglect farmers. And we weren't prepared to make substandard wines. And I started the organic conversion process in 2009. We took out at least half of the vineyards on Spear because we knew that we're never going to make good wines. And it's been a long, these are just a manifestation of a long process involving myself in Spear. We live on the farm. We're very involved with the guys. Franz Smith started making like organic wines from the grapes that didn't go into the other Spear wines. And yeah, we've just been speaking at length about this project.
There are two main questions I think most people are going to be drinking this wine will ask.
Sure.
Yours will be around, as a farmer, is it costing me more? Is it more difficult? Is it more intensive?
Sure.
If I'm drinking this wine, I want to know, is it making the world a better place? And is it affecting the quality of the wine? I think we can say pretty comprehensively it's going to make the world a better place if this is the style we employ. What is your word to the skeptic? Before we taste this, which you will in a second, you might say, well, hang on, surely this means that you're not going to be able to make the wine quite as well as you were.
Well, that is an unfortunate legacy issue in the organic, probably biodynamic, regenerative wine world. And friends of mine, when I've been talking about this involvement, they're going, it's an organic wine, which by the way is just a fact. It's one of many elements to this wine. We're not marketing this as solely an organic wine. It is one of the products from the regenerative exercise that we're doing on the farm. The fact that it's organic certified and has been for a long time, that's just an added bonus. So, but exactly that. Can I drink it? Well, I can tell you now, everyone who's had a drink of it has been pleasantly surprised. They are eminently drinkable wines.
All right, let's try the one. Tell me about this rosé, because a lot of the rosé we're drinking in South Africa at the moment is a lot paler.
Yes. So what I've done is I paired the rosé with my Black Forest ham.
Fabulous.
Okay.
Should I try the wine or the ham first?
Well, it's your call, but I would do the wine first.
Wine first, all right. Okay, so we've got a slightly darker style of rosé here. Most rosé looks like an English tourist who's been in South Africa for about an hour.
Yes.
This one is the English tourist who's been here for about 4 hours.
Thank you.
And has still forgotten their suntan cream.
You.
So it's got that sort of slightly more bad look to it. I'm guessing that speaks to your varietals. What have you used?
So we use Shiraz, and there's no skin contact. It's just pressed and then into the barrel or the egg.
Despite the deeper colour, which in the past might often have suggested an avalanche of sugar, that's not there at all. It is delightfully savoury, beautifully balanced, and quite cool in the colour, and it's just a little bit different to what we see so much of at the moment. And crying out, I feel, for some Black Forest ham. So let me see if this collision is a happy one. And this is all from the farm as well.
Yes. So in the spirit of what we're doing, we're the only guys in the country who cure this meat without adding nitrites, and phosphates.
That salinity lifts a little bit more of the fruit afterwards as well. But they do go together really nice. Yeah, I do love it when with wine and food, they do accent each other slightly, but they don't overwhelm each other or completely distort. You've got a really nice pairing there.
Do you think the rosé picks up the smokiness in this? Because this is lightly smoked.
I think it does. I wouldn't have suggested, though, that this was smoked. I would have thought that this was actually a pig with a really bad Marlborough Red habit and that it just fed through. But it's your farm, so that probably wouldn't be allowed. No, it does, but it's subtle and it's gentle. And it's rosé as wine.
My pigs aren't allowed to smoke with a filter.
As should be the case, I feel. No, that's a delight. That's a really cool first wine. And it's worked really nicely as a pairing. It does mean you set the bar rather high, though. So jumping on to wine number 2.
Okay, so wine number 2 is a Chenin Blanc. It's part of the Old Vine series. So this
again, these are grapes at Spear?
Old grapes at Spear, yeah. This was the vineyard on which I got into farming, and I used to make some wine from this. It planted in 1983. And interestingly, this was a conventionally farmed vineyard for 20 years. Lots of water, lots of fertilizer, lots of, I can talk you through the conventional viticultural approach. The farmer then abandoned it for about 3 years.
Just left it entirely.
Just left it. Can you imagine what these plants went through after being, drip fed basically for 20 years and then just abandoned. Anyway, so we then started resurrecting the vineyard and very much, so this pairing is with our prosciutto. Okay. And also a Chenin Blanc leaf on the front.
Now here I'll suspect you'll get it right, not just because generally I would, but because Chenin Blanc has got such wondrous versatility when it comes to food. There's, I don't think, any grape that can deliver on as much as Chenin Blanc does. All right, here we go. It is lovely. Back to the wine. I'm starting to think we might need to do this on a weekly basis, just for issues of quality control.
Well, actually, what I'd like you to do, if you're okay with that, is we'll stick the corks back in here, and we'll do the Nicolas Joly thing, or his organisation called Return to Terroir, where they write the date on the tasting, and then in a week's time they'll taste the wines again. And their standard is that it takes 4 weeks for the wines to fall over.
4 weeks is hefty. And is that simply based on this is how we're making the wine and therefore it should be able to last this long?
If you use making as from growing through to the end product, yes. Look, without going too esoteric, their view is that a wine that can, the longer a wine can resist, they use the word, I think he used the word forces of death or oxidation, whatever we want to use.
Forces of death.
Wonderfully dramatic.
Not remotely dramatic,
But,
yes.
but be that as it may, the longer it can withstand oxidation, which is what is happening, the attack of oxygen, when oxygen rusts metal, oxygen, that's what oxygen does. The longer it can resist that, the stronger the wine is, the stronger what they call the life forces in the wine are. Because what these guys do is they try and capture what they call the energy of the wine or the electromagnetic frequency that comes with the wine. They do a thing called copper chloride crystallization. So in a laboratory, we have tools that are sophisticated enough to measure. I mean, you're giving off a vibration, I'm giving off a vibration, everything gives off, even this table's giving off a vibration. So the more sophisticated your measuring equipment is, the more you can sense what that is. And then within what the vibration is, it's the pattern of the vibration, the harmony of the pattern, as opposed to if it's a disjointed pattern. So this is a whole different world we're talking about, but I'm digressing about the tasting. It'd be wonderful if you could do that experiment.
I would love to. I'm envisioning a show where I dress up in a tie-dyed caftan and interview you and Jonathan from Avondale, where I think this could
What's
take the show.
Jonathan going to wear, and what am I going to wear?
He'll definitely have his preacher's cowboy hat on, because he's never been seen without it. Other than that, I'm not sure. We digress happily, but let's get back to the last of the wines.
Okay.
We're 2 from 2 on both some really lovely wine and some great pairings. The last of these I'm interested in because the biltong I spy has got those wonderfully South African fringes of hefty yellow fat. It's a delight.
And this is a 2018.
So it's got some bottle age, and yet it still feels so fresh and so vibrant and so alive, which I suspect, without wanting to give you even more kudos as a farmer than you've already got, probably is in some small part thanks to the way you're making this, because you are giving the grapes, giving the whole process the very best chance to show itself in the best way possible.
Again, I'm going to have to try and remember that.
The wine is terrific. The pairings are very much an added bonus. Really have enjoyed them, but also the chance to showcase your approach and one that you clearly believe in so fervently, understand the good behind, and are so happy to share the gospel with, make it a really important project. So thank you for sharing it, and thank you for some great wine and some equally good charcuterie.
Wonderful. Thank you, man.
So there we go, the new wines of Farmer Angus. Next time you're getting sound healing at a vegan nudist camp, this is the wine for you. Farmer Angus, the farming preacher. He doesn't preach, but he's clearly very, very intent on trying to shift mindsets both within the industry and beyond, so that those who are producing wine or just farming anything realize how we can do so in the best possible way. And then those of us that are buying products from those farmers are actively looking out for what's making this wine better in terms of how it's produced, what's making our food better, and what's allowing a world that's taken a fair battering from the human race to try and claw its way back a little. And people like Angus are really important, and the added bonus, he's making some pretty good wine as well, and that charcuterie is world class. It's been quite a nostalgic day coming along here, not because I've been to this particular space before, the restaurants here in the park, but what I have found, which takes me back, are all of these wine labels. And I think this is the Reserve Chardonnay from Chamonix, but it is that Chamonix Rouge and 20 rand a bottle. It was one of my very first wines out of Franschhoek. And in fact, my very first one, the first one I bought, was from 1995 La Motte Millennium. Oh, this is the Syrah, but it's another red from a very established brand. And I see this and I think back to my university days and how Franschhoek played such a rich role. So look out in the next few weeks. Snapshot of the wines of Franschhoek and some terrific winemakers coming up on Dan Really Likes Wine. Right now, though, there's a menu that I need to go and lay siege to because it looks terrific. And there is also some vintage wine from Franschhoek in the company of some great winemakers to go and pay attention to as well. In the meantime, I'll leave you with a couple of things. Do look out for a little more detail on the wine you're buying or the food that you're purchasing in terms of how it's made, how it's farmed, how it is produced. Is it the best way possible? It is a philosophy that is changing but needs to change a little more. And then also have a look out for Kebo Noir. It's available at Norman Goodfellows, and Kensi and Tebogo's brand is only going to get stronger. That does it for today. Thank you very much for joining me here in the park of Johannesburg, this urban wonderland, contrary to the belief of many. I got some great wine to try out. We'll see you next week. Goodbye.